I want to start today with a little word association game. If I say archangel, what's the absolute first image that slams into your brain? Be honest.
Oh, it's cinematic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for 90% of people, the immediate image is, well, it's a warrior.
A warrior.
You're picturing Archangel Michael. You've got the massive, blindingly white wings, the flaming sword, maybe a trumpet that shatters glass. It's loud, it's imposing, and it's very much about external power.
Exactly. It's an action movie poster. It's about conquering darkness with force. But today, we are flipping that script entirely.
Completely.
We are doing a deep dive into a figure who is the polar opposite of all that noise. We're talking about the silent light of the soul, the ruler of the moon, and the master of intuition. We are unpacking Chapter 8 of 12 Archangels, which focuses entirely on Archangel Haniel.
Also known as Haniel in some esoteric texts.
Yeah.
And I love this choice for a deep dive because Haniel really, she challenges our modern definition of power. She isn't about the battle. She's about what happens after the battle, or perhaps what is happening deeply within the person fighting it.
The source material uses some really evocative language right off the bat. It describes her atmosphere as silver light, lunar mysteries, and the joy of God.
Right.
But our mission today isn't just to talk about pretty aesthetics or mystical vibes. We want to figure out how this specific figure represents the intersection of emotional intelligence and esoteric wisdom, because the text makes a pretty aggressive claim.
It does. It basically argues that logic, structure, and all your smart, strategic 5-year plans are, well, they're useless without the mirror-like faculty of intuition.
Which is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of us who live by our calendars.
It is. But think of it this way. If Michael is the sun-blazing, revealing raw output, constant daylight Haniel is the moon.
Okay.
And you cannot have a functioning ecosystem with just the sun. You'd burn everything to a crisp. You need the reflection, you need the cooling off, you need the night.
So let's get the introductions out of the way properly. Who exactly is Haniel? You mentioned the name means joy of God or grace of God.
That's the translation, yes. And that word grace is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It defines her whole atmosphere.
How so?
The text describes her presence as silvery and mystical. Contrast that with, say, Archangel Uriel, who we've discussed before. Uriel is often called the torch of revelation.
A torch, right. It's a sharp, penetrating light. It lights up the dark corners of your mind with raw data or, sudden epiphanies. It's like turning on a floodlight in a dark room.
Exactly. And it's helpful, but it casts hard shadows. It's stark.
Yeah.
Haniel is different. She is described not as a torch, but as the glow of inner knowing. It's softer. It doesn't burn. It enfolds.
It's the difference between staring at a light bulb and standing in moonlight.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
One blinds you, the other lets you see the shapes and contours of things without hurting your eyes.
That distinction, torch versus glow, is really helpful. A glow allows you to navigate without feeling exposed.
And it gives you context. The source material emphasizes that she governs the sacred rhythm of lunar phases. Now think about modern professional life.
Oh boy.
We are obsessed with constant, steady output. The line on the graph must always go up. We want to be linear. But Haniel represents the cycle, the waxing and the waning. She reminds us that humans aren't machines. We are ecosystems.
Speaking of ecosystems, the esoteric traditions link her to the seventh heaven and call her the gatekeeper to divine ecstasy.
Right.
But there's a detail here that I found really specific and interesting. She is associated with Friday. The text says she combines Venusian grace with lunar mystery.
And this is a crucial duality to understand if you want to get her vibe. In astrology and mysticism, Venus is about attraction, beauty, connection. It's what draws things together. It's the charm.
Okay.
But the moon is about depth, the subconscious, the psyche.
So when you combine them?
When you combine them in Haniel, you don't just get pretty, you get magnetic depth. She isn't just about things looking good on the surface. She's about the emotional machinery behind the beauty. She is the bridge between feeling good and understanding why you feel good deep in your soul. It's charm with a heavy undercurrent of intuition.
Okay, I want to get under the hood of that machinery. The source material gets pretty technical with the astrological and Kabbalistic framework, and I don't want to gloss over it.
We definitely shouldn't.
We have to talk about the zodiac connection, because the text aligns Haniel with Cancer.
Yes, the cardinal water sign.
Now, for the listeners who aren't deep into astrology, when I think Cancer, I usually think moody, or I think of the crab shell. But the text focuses heavily on nurturing qualities and emotional purification. What's the connection there?
Well, think about what the moon actually does physically to the Earth. It moves the oceans. It controls the tides.
Right.
It drags massive bodies of water back and forth. The analogy the source uses is really strong. Just as the moon moves the physical waters of the planet, Haniel controls the inner waters of the soul.
Inner waters, meaning our emotions.
Emotions, intuition, the subconscious flow. Haniel helps regulate that tide. She helps release fears, attachments, and emotional imbalances.
So if you've ever felt like your emotions were drowning you, like a tidal wave.
Or conversely, like you were emotionally dried up and numb, that is a Haniel issue. She regulates the hydraulic pressure of the psyche.
That leads us directly to the Kabbalistic tree of life. The text places Haniel at the sefirah of Yesod. Now, we need to break this down. Let's ELI5 this because Kabbalah can get dense.
Sure.
The text calls Yesod the foundation.
Okay, so imagine the tree of life is like a giant circuit board for divine energy. At the very top, you have the high voltage, power plant pure spiritual energy, total abstraction.
Okay.
At the very bottom, you have the light bulb, our physical reality, the material world, the chair you're sitting in.
So energy travels from the plant to the bulb. Where is Yesod?
Yesod is the final transformer or the lens right before the electricity hits the bulb. It's the energetic filter connecting the upper spiritual spheres to our physical world. The text describes it as the storehouse of dreams, memory, and psychic impressions.
So it's the translation layer.
Precisely. Here is the key. Before a thought becomes an action, it passes through Yesod. Before a spiritual archetype becomes a real-world symbol, it passes through Yesod.
So it's like the film in a movie projector.
That's a perfect analogy. The light shines through the film to make the picture on the screen. Yesod is the film.
That's huge because if the film is scratched or dirty, the movie on the screen is going to be terrible.
Nailed it. That is exactly why Haniel is so important. She stands at that threshold. She ensures that the film, our subconscious, our memories, our symbols, is clear.
Wow.
She ensures that symbols like the ones used in rituals or even just the art and media we consume aren't just things we look at. She ensures they're mysteries absorbed.
Mysteries absorbed. I like that phrasing. It's the difference between looking at a painting of a sad person and actually feeling the grief yourself.
Right. Without that connection to Yesod, without Haniel, a symbol is just a drawing. A ritual is just a play. With her, it becomes an emotional trigger that actually rewires you.
This sets up what I think is the most fascinating part of this document and the biggest chunk of our analysis, Haniel's role in Freemasonry.
Yeah, this part is great.
Now, I know we have listeners who are Masons and many who aren't, but this analysis is fascinating regardless because it's basically a masterclass in how humans learn deep truths.
Absolutely. The principles here apply to anyone trying to master a skill, understand themselves, or just grow up.
The source claims that while Freemasonry is often defined as a system of morality veiled in allegory, Haniel represents the unvoiced truths, the emotional transformations.
This goes back to that mirror faculty we touched on earlier. The moon reflects the sun.
Right.
In this context, the rituals, the words, the memorization, the lodge itself, that's the sun, the active masculine part. It's the external structure. But the initiate, the person experiencing it, has to be the moon.
They have to reflect on it.
To make it an interior reality.
So if you're just memorizing the words to pass a test or just going through the motions of your job without thinking about the why, you're missing Haniel.
You're missing the point entirely. Haniel rules the reflective consciousness. You can have all the information in the world, the sun, but without the reflection, the moon, it doesn't become wisdom. It just stays data. It bounces off you.
The text specifically links her to the Fellowcraft degree. Why that one specifically?
The Fellowcraft is the second degree in Freemasonry. The first degree is very focused on the physical, the rough stone, labor, morality, chipping away at your vices.
Okay.
But the Fellowcraft is where the emphasis shifts. It moves to mental and emotional ascent. There's this famous imagery in the degree of climbing a winding staircase.
I've always been curious about that imagery. A winding staircase implies you can't see the top when you start climbing.
Precisely. That's the design. If it were a straight ladder, you could look up and see the goal. You could calculate the effort.
But a winding staircase requires trust.
It does. You have to take the next step without seeing the destination. That requires the heart and intellect to harmonize.
Right, because logic hates a blind corner.
Logic screams at a blind corner. Logic says, stop until we have a map. But you can't climb that staircase with just logic. You need to feel your way up as well. Haniel ensures that the learning isn't merely cerebral. It has to be viscerally understood.
There's a specific concept here that I think is the aha nugget of the episode, the big takeaway for everyone. The text talks about the between moments.
Yes. This is, in my opinion, the most actionable part of the chapter.
The text says Haniel rules the silences in refreshment. She is present when labor stops.
Think about how we usually view a pause in work. In our culture, a pause is dead time. Or, at best, we view it like recharging a battery. We only rest so we can get back to work and be productive again.
Yeah, the work is the point. The rest is just maintenance.
Right. I'll sleep when I'm dead, or the grind set mindset. If you aren't producing, you're failing. But Haniel's perspective, and the perspective of these mystery traditions, is radically different. The source argues that she governs the moments of pause because that is when the work takes root.
Ah, so integration happens in the silence.
It does. The truth sometimes arrives not as a shout from a pulpit, but as a whisper in the dark.
That completely reframes the learning process. It means the learning doesn't happen when you're reading the textbook or listening to the lecture.
Yeah.
It happens when you close the book and just stare out the window for 10 minutes.
That moment of staring out the window, that is the Haniel moment. That is the most productive part of the process. Neuroscientifically, we know this is true now. The brain consolidates memory during rest. But mystically, Haniel ensures the unvoiced truths sink in. If you skip the silence, you skip the transformation.
Moving deeper into the symbolism, the source draws a line between Haniel and the High Priestess card in the tarot.
Which is one of the most mysterious and debated cards in the deck.
Visually, she's usually depicted sitting between two pillars, Boaz and Jachin, which connects right back to the Masonic Temple.
It does. Boaz and Jachin represent dualities, strength and establishment, active and passive, sun and moon.
And she's between them.
The High Priestess sits between them. She is the balance point. Her role is guarding the veil of the temple. But notice how she teaches. The High Priestess doesn't lecture. She holds a scroll, but it's often half concealed. She teaches through presence and silence, not instruction.
It's the difference between a teacher telling you the answer to 2 + 2 and a teacher just staring at you until you realize the answer yourself.
And that is an incredibly uncomfortable process. That's why we avoid it. We want the direct answer. We want the cheat sheet. But Haniel, like the High Priestess, forces you to sit in the mystery until it clicks. She knows that knowledge you fight for internally is worth more than knowledge you're handed externally.
The text also brings up a point about gender here that I think is important to clarify. It says that while Freemasonry is historically masculine in structure, it's a fraternity, Haniel represents the undeniable feminine dimension of the lodge.
Right, and we have to be super clear. The text isn't talking about biological gender or politics here.
Not at all.
It's talking about energetic principles. The masculine, in this esoteric sense, is projective, active, building, structuring. The feminine is receptive, intuitive, holding space.
Why is that balance so important in a system that is seemingly about building and architecture? I mean, Masons are builders, right?
Because you can't just build outward. You have to build inward. The goal, according to the source, is emotional maturity. It's about balancing justice with empathy and building with dreaming.
Building with dreaming.
That is such a lovely phrase.
If you have a lodge or a company or a family that is all structure, rules, and logic, it becomes rigid, becomes brittle.
Eventually it breaks.
It breaks. Haniel brings the flexibility. The text says that when a lodge flows smoothly and differences are reconciled with kindness, that is Haniel's influence.
Yeah.
It's the soft power that keeps the structure from collapsing under its own weight.
It really emphasizes that her altar is the heart.
Yes. It's not the brain.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the inner waters. The text mentions that Haniel helps release fears and attachments. How does that fit into this idea of gaining knowledge? Usually we think of learning as adding things, adding facts, adding skills, but this sounds like subtraction.
That's a brilliant observation. Remember Yesod, that filter we talked about, the movie film?
The circuit board filter. Right. Yesod is the storehouse of memory, but it's also the storehouse of baggage. Old emotional patterns, traumas, biases, that time you were embarrassed in 3rd grade. If those waters are murky, the reflection of the sun is distorted.
So if your emotional water is choppy or dirty with fear, you can't reflect the truth clearly.
Exactly. You project your own insecurities onto the world. Haniel's role in emotional purification is about calming those waters so the reflection is true.
So it's about letting go.
It's about letting go of the fear that blocks intuition. You can't hear the whisper in the dark if your internal monologue is screaming with anxiety or defensiveness.
So in a practical sense, invoking Haniel or aligning with this energy isn't just about lighting a silver candle and feeling spooky. It's about doing the hard work of clearing out your emotional junk.
It is. And the source lists the result of this alignment: emotional intelligence, empathetic leadership. And this one is key: certainty without proof.
Certainty without proof. That scares a lot of logical people. That sounds like delusion to a skeptic.
It walks a fine line, for sure. But we live in a world of data. Show me the metrics. Show me the study. Haniel offers the confidence to follow the heart's compass.
Yeah.
It's that feeling when you just know the right path, even if the spreadsheet says otherwise. The source argues that this form of knowing is just as valid and often more powerful than logical deduction.
It reminds me of that feeling when you meet someone and everything looks right on paper. Great resume, great references, but your gut just screams, run!
That's Haniel protecting the gate. That is the high priestess guarding the veil. That is the inner radiance warning you. And how many times have we ignored that voice because we couldn't prove it, only to regret it later?
Too many times. That soft power turns out to be pretty durable.
It's the strongest thing we have, actually.
As we start to wrap this deep dive up, I'm struck by how relevant this is to, well, everyone. We're all overwhelmed with information. We're all trying to build our lives, stack our bricks, get that promotion.
But we rarely stop to let the cement dry. We don't respect the rhythm. We try to live in eternal high noon. We want the sun to be shining and productive 24/7. But Haniel teaches us that the lunar phase, the darkness, the reflection, the quiet, is not a failure. It's a biological and spiritual requirement.
The summary here seems to be that Haniel represents the necessity of that soft power. In a world or a lodge or a workplace obsessed with action, she stands for intuition, rest, and reflection.
She offers a counterbalance. She reminds us that the temple isn't just the stone building outside, it's the space within you. And if that inner space is cluttered, noisy, or ignored, the outer structure doesn't matter.
Her temple is within, and her altar is the heart.
And remember, she doesn't shout. If you want to find this wisdom, you have to quiet down enough to hear it.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to carry deeply into your day. The source suggests that between every single action you take, between the emails, between the meetings, between the breaths, there's a tiny sliver of stillness. A moment pregnant with power.
It's always there, waiting for you to notice it.
So here's the question we want to leave you with. What truths might you be missing simply because you haven't stopped striving long enough to listen to the silence?
That's the real work.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.